On today's podcast, you'll learn 8 more colloquial expressions so that you can sound more like a native speaker. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And my name's Craig.
And with over 50 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm doing very well, thank you. As usual, I am excited to be podcasting again with you this week, and I'm ready to talk about colloquial expressions. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm in the middle of my holiday, which I have to say, I think I've deserved. So I'm just taking it easy. I've got my feet up. I'm getting ready for the start of the next term.
I think you have definitely deserved your New Year's break. First this week, we have a voice message from Sara from Spain.
Hi, Greg. Hi, Reza. This is Sara from Spain. And first of all, I wanted to thank you guys for your podcast and for your work, because I can imagine that recording to a podcast every single week, it's not an easy work. And you always do it with this joy and happiness. And I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you guys for your effort. And I also wanted to tell you an anecdote, because I was talking with my workmate and he was like, Sara, I was in London and I realized how bad my level of English was because I couldn't understand almost anything they told me. And that made me think that maybe in my case, it's the same, because I am listening to your podcast almost every day and I can understand you guys perfectly. I mean, not perfectly, but almost perfectly, maybe a 90%. But I think it's just because you guys speak so slow and you use easy words and you explain all so well. And I really thank you guys, but so bye-bye, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Sara, not only for sending us your voice message, but for your lovely words and comments about the podcast. And you said that you find us usually in a good mood, joyful and happy. That's exactly how you sounded to me with your excellent intonation and your stress. Your pronunciation was very, very good. And it's lovely listening to you because you've put expression in the way that you recorded that message, and it was a pleasure to listen to. Do you agree, Reza?
Craig, you took the words out of my mouth. Honestly, that is exactly what I was going to say. Not long ago, Sara, I wrote some reports for a C2 level class of mine. That's proficiency level. And as you can imagine, they all have a pretty good level of English. But for nearly all of the students, I wrote the same comment. Yes, your pronunciation is pretty good, but use intonation and stress more to add meaning to what you say. I would not have to write that for you.
No.
Your use of intonation and stress was fantastic. As Craig said, it really struck me immediately. So fantastic use of intonation and stress. I would use you as an example in my classes. Well done.
By the way, if anybody listening would like to listen to a podcast about stress and how to use it effectively with contrastive stress, etc., go back 2 episodes ago where I spoke to Claire from englishathome.com. I think it was episode 446, and she spoke about stress and how to use it effectively in English. So that's not for you, Sara, you don't need it. But if anybody's listening and you think the way you're speaking English is a bit flat and constant and you're not raising your voice or stressing your speaking a little bit like this, like a robot, go and listen to Claire's podcast. I think you'll find it useful.
Having said that, I'm sorry, I always have to be the killjoy. A killjoy is a person who, well, kills the joy. We've been praising you, but here comes a little criticism. I'm the killjoy. You did say a couple of things which we could improve. I think you said an easy work. Yeah, you said it's not an easy work. But of course, you can't say an with work because it's uncountable. So you're right. Recording podcasts every week is not easy work. It takes quite a lot of determination and consistency. But we can't say and with the word work. It's uncountable.
Another thing I noticed, Sarah, I think you said, I'm listening to your podcast almost every day. Well, that sounds to me like a habit, something you do regularly. So it's not a good idea to use the present continuous when you're talking about habits on a daily or weekly basis. Better to use the present simple. I listen to your podcast almost every day.
And one other little thing I noticed. Is it even a mistake? Technically, yes, but lots of native speakers would say exactly the same as you. You said for the podcast, we speak so slow. Really, you should say so slowly because you're describing how we speak. We speak slowly. We need an adverb because speak is a verb and a word which describes a verb should be an adverb. Slow is an adjective, so really you should say so slowly. However, lots of native speakers would say the same as you. These days, you hear people using adjectives with adverbs and no one's going to say you're wrong. However, do it in a Cambridge exam, level C1, C2, and they'll notice it and they won't let you off with it. So better to do it the right way.
Absolutely. I noticed that a lot with our American English friends across the pond, as we say. So it's very common in American English to use adjectives in the place of adverbs, but really you should be using an adverb.
And by the way, Sarah, do we speak so slowly? What do you think, Craig?
I think we speak as teachers speak. I don't think we make an effort to speak more slowly. I try to speak normally, although I am aware of leaving pauses instead of as I mentioned last week. But no, I don't think we speak especially slowly. The problem your friend might be having in London with understanding different people could be because they're not all native speakers. It could be because you find these days a lot of people from other countries living and working in London. So, for example, it might be an Indian person who's speaking English with an Indian accent, or a Chinese person speaking English with a Chinese accent, etc. Also, the accent in London, if it's a Cockney accent, and a Cockney accent is from the centre of London, can be difficult to understand if you're not used to hearing it. So what advice could you give to Sarah and her friend or anybody who wants to improve their listening of different accents?
Well, listen to as wide a range as possible. Don't just limit yourself to standard British English because you're talking about about 2% of the people in the world who speak that way. It's not that useful. It's nice to have some kind of standard to compare everything to and something to aim towards, but it's highly unlikely that the majority of people you meet will speak that way. So search out different accents, Australian, Canadian, American, Irish, and foreign accents as well. Indian, French people, German people, English people are...
I have to speak more slowly.
Exactly. You see, I was reading too fast.
Yeah, you're speaking too quickly.
Too fast. You don't have to speak...
Slow down, Reza. Take it easy.
I need to practice while I preach. You don't have to listen to only native English speakers. You should listen from time to time, not all the time, from time to time to non-native speakers. Get used to their accents because, for example, if you spend any length of time in London at all, you will hear Asian accents, French accents, Latin American accents. So you better get used to them. People who aren't familiar with foreign accents in English are going to have problems as well because English is the global language.
Absolutely. So vary your listening. Don't only listen to this podcast, listen to many different podcasts, many listening sources to get exposure to different accents.
Yeah, but don't listen to any podcast more than this one though, Sarah. We wouldn't like that. Listen to other podcasts from time to time and reflect how ours is much better. Would you agree, Craig?
Absolutely. Don't stop listening to us. Keep listening, Sarah. We appreciate you. Now let's move on to the focus of this episode, and that is common colloquial expressions, part 10. Now we've spoken about expressions before, and I've listed the episode numbers in the show notes, the other 9 episodes that we've made on common colloquial expressions. So to see those numbers of where you can find the other episodes, go to inglespodcast.com/448, where you will see the show notes for this episode. Reza, what's the first one?
Craig, thing is, I can't remember. Oh no, here it is. I've got it. Oh, it's the thing is.
Nice introduction.
The thing is the first one. It's a very useful comment. This the thing is. So when do we use it? To introduce an explanation, or to comment on something, or to give an opinion, or sometimes it's often used as a kind of excuse. So Craig asked me, "What's the first thing we're going to talk about?" And I said, "The thing is, I don't know. I'd forgotten." So that was my explanation. Quite often we use it as an excuse. Imagine Craig said to me, "Have you done that translation you said you'd do for my friend?" And I say, "Yeah, thing is, I've been a bit busy, so I haven't done it." I'm explaining it, and by starting with the thing is, quite often we suspect that the explanation is an excuse. I haven't done what I should have done.
Actually, I heard through a mutual friend of ours that you had a party last Saturday, but I don't remember you inviting me or mentioning it to me.
The thing is, Craig, well, you wouldn't want to come, would you? It's not, parties, they're not your type of thing, are they?
Well, the thing is, I wanted to go, but I didn't want to just arrive without being invited.
I didn't think you'd want to. Oh, dear. Well, you don't particularly like expensive champagne and imported beluga caviar in the company of extremely glamorous ladies, do you? That's not your type of thing.
Well, the thing is, I do, actually. Imagine a situation, you invite somebody to your house for dinner and you serve meatballs, which is what we've got for lunch today, by the way. And you say to this person who you're not very friendly with, you don't know very well, "Why didn't you eat your meatballs?" Well, the thing is, I'm a vegetarian. So, as Reza said, you use that to identify a problem to what's just been said, or to maybe introduce an explanation, a comment, or an opinion. The thing is, blah, blah, blah.
Our next colloquial expression is kind of or sort of. Although I shouldn't really say it that way, because what you're probably going to hear is kinda and sorta. That's the weak pronunciation, which in the middle of a sentence is probably what you'll hear. But what does it mean, Craig?
Well, it's a replacement or a kind of alternative to the real thing. For example, I had a problem with the door of my car last week, so I didn't have any tools with me. I used my shoe as kind of a hammer to fix and to repair the car door. So it was kind of a hammer. It wasn't a hammer, but it was kind of a hammer or sort of a hammer. And as Reza said, the pronunciation could also be kind of a hammer or sort of a hammer. But there's another meaning that's similar, but not exactly the same, isn't there?
Yes, another meaning of those words is partially or a bit. Let me give you an example. I'm kind of sad that I didn't have a Christmas dinner this year. Yeah, kind of sad, but not really sad because, I've had so many Christmas dinners in my time, but yeah, maybe it would have been nice. I'm kind of sad. I'm a bit sad.
I'm kind of sad. I'm kind of upset that you didn't invite me to your party last week. Or another example, I'm feeling sort of hungry, which means I'm feeling a bit hungry. I'm feeling sort of hungry even though I've recently just had my dinner. So again, that pronunciation, sort of, the of becomes weak, of, and the t of sort joins with the vowel sound of. So sort of. I'm feeling sort of hungry.
Another use of kind of or sort of is when something is difficult to describe. For example, what is a podcast? Well, for an older person, they might never have listened to a podcast. If it's a really old person, they might just know about radio and TV, possibly a little bit about internet. So you could say to them, well, a podcast, let me describe it for you, Grandad. It's sort of a radio show for the internet. Sort of.
Or if you're describing a person or something a person's wearing, you could say his shirt is kind of a greenish blue colour. Or sort of. His shirt is sort of a greenish blue colour. Or the girl I met yesterday, she's sort of medium height with kind of brownish dark blonde hair, and she's got a tattoo on her arm that's kind of sexy. So you're describing something, you're giving an approximation of what the appearance is by using sort of or kind of. Do you play golf, Reza?
No, I don't. Why do you ask?
Well, there's something in golf that is a par, P-A-R. And of course, you play golf on a course, on a golf course, in the same way that you play football on a football field or a football pitch. So the expression par for the course. Now, par in golf is the amount of hits or strikes of the ball that you should make to get the ball into the hole. For example, if a particular hole on the golf course is par 3, that means you should not take more than 3 shots to get the ball in the hole. So if you're over par, you've taken more, maybe 4 or 5 shots. And if you're 1 under par, you did it in 2, not 3. So what does the expression par for the course mean as an idiom?
Okay, so now I get where you were going with that. Par for the course. It means it's normal, it's typical, or to be expected. That would be especially when something is a source of annoyance or frustration. So quite often we say it like, yeah, normal. Yeah, I expected that, to show that I'm annoyed, that, it's always the same. No change. For example, of course, we're not getting a rise in salary this year. That's just par for the course at this company. They're such a terrible company. They never do anything nice for the workers. No rise in salary again. Par for the course. To be expected. No variation from the norm.
Yeah, expected. I tried to phone my insurance company last week. This is true, by the way. I needed to renew my insurance for my car. And I was waiting on the phone for about half an hour. But these days, with electronic answering services, that's par for the course. You expect to wait that long to get to speak to a real person.
Craig, I've thought of another expression with par, but it's not quite the same. What would I mean if I said to you, up to par?
I would understand that to mean as good as what you had expected or what you had required it to be or what you demanded from it. So satisfactory or adequate. Let me give you an example. We went to the restaurant again, our favorite restaurant, and as usual, the food was up to par with its usual standard. It was as good as it has always been. Exactly the same high standard. It was up to par.
I guess it has a connection with the first expression, par for the course, in the sense of as expected. But it's more positive, isn't it? If something's up to par, you expected it to be good because it usually is good, and it was. Whereas our previous expression, par for the course, we're not surprised, as expected, but probably in a negative way, not an impressive way. Just the same old boring or unexciting or uninspiring thing as always.
Exactly. And I'm really pleased to see that Reza's podcasting is up to par today, as good as it always is. Well done. Although I do have a question for you, Reza. Did you get me a Christmas present this year or not?
Thing is, Craig, I've been kind of busy. And, well, it's not Christmas. Is Christmas over?
I didn't really want to put you on the spot. I just noticed that you didn't give me anything. What does to put someone on the spot mean?
Well, Craig has kind of put me on the spot now. He forced me into a situation that I didn't want to be in, and I had to make a difficult decision, or in this case, I had to actually answer him, and I didn't want to, because the truth is I didn't get him a Christmas present, and I had to say it to him, and I don't have a good explanation why. So he got me there.
Can you think of another example?
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how much money do you expect to make next year, Craig?
Oh, that's really put me on the spot. Why do you ask?
Oh, I'm just kind of interested.
See, that's my typical response to questions I don't want to answer. Why do you ask? That's very useful, that question.
Yeah,
How much money do you earn? Why do you ask?
That's really good. I like that, Craig, because you're like kind of obliging the other person to reveal that, they're being nosy.
Yeah.
They kind of publicly have to admit, because in a roundabout way, because I'm nosy, I'm asking you something I shouldn't. You throw the ball back at them, don't you?
So instead of them putting you on the spot, you are then putting them on the spot. Next, number 5, we have another expression that might be useful for you: to give the go-ahead. To give someone the go-ahead, which means to give permission to do something. Can you think of an example?
What about this? Imagine Craig and I are waiting, or we have been waiting for a sponsor to sign a contract with us to sponsor the podcast. And I say to Craig, good news. We've been given the go-ahead to sign the contract with a podcast sponsor. So we were checking all the legal details, all the conditions. We're happy. Okay, we've been given the go-ahead. We've been told that we can sign. We've been given permission.
Another expression that's very similar is to green light something, or to give something the green light. So it can be used as a verb or a noun. For example, the local council has given the green light to the new shopping centre. It's going ahead. They are going to do it. So to give the go-ahead, to green light something, like a traffic light, or to give something the green light. Let's have one more example.
Well, I can actually think of another variation. We could also say to give the okay.
Yeah.
So normally we just say the word okay on its own, don't we? Like, how do you feel? Okay. Or are you happy? Yeah, okay. But specifically to say the words to give the okay, and you must include the word the. To give the okay is the same as to give the go-ahead. For example, my boss has given me the okay to go home early from work tomorrow. I asked him for permission. He's given me the okay. In other words, he's given me the go-ahead.
What's our next expression? Do you remember?
Oh, what was it? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, what are we talking about? Oh, no, I can't remember, Craig. You know what? Because I've lost my train of thought.
You're going home by train.
No. I've lost my train of thought.
You've lost your train. You've missed your train. You've arrived too late.
Oh, Craig's got he's got the wrong end of the stick here. I don't know who's worse, him or me. We've both lost our train of thought. That's our expression. To lose your train of thought. Not to lose your train. If you lose your train, you wanted to go somewhere, but you can't go. But if you've lost your train of thought, you were thinking about something, but now you cannot remember what you were thinking about. Yeah, the train of your thoughts has been derailed.
And I must say thank you to Daniel Goodson for this expression, because we spoke about this when I spoke to Daniel a while ago about his podcast, My Fluent Podcast. So hello, Daniel. Daniel lost his train of thought in the middle of a conversation. So it's when you forget what you were going to say, which when you're my age happens quite a lot. You can also call it a senior moment if you are not a young person. So I'm having a senior moment. I've lost my train of thought. And you can also use an expression which isn't very nice. Be careful where you use this because it's quite colloquial. It's to have a brain fart. F-A-R-T. Now, a fart usually comes from the other side of your body, but if it happens in your brain, then you completely lose your train of thought. I've had a brain fart. I can't remember what I was going to say, but be careful where you use that expression because it definitely is not for a job interview.
And Craig, do you find that you're having more senior moments now than, say, 2 years ago?
Yes, not only senior moments, but I walk into rooms with the dirty dishes and why am I in the bedroom with the dirty plates and cutleries? I just lose my train
Craig,
of thought.
please don't tell us any more about your sex life, what you do in the bedroom. If you need cutlery and dirty dishes, that's your business. You do what you like.
What a strange fetish that is. But yeah, it does happen often. And yeah, I make sure I carry a notebook with me and I write down ideas because I very often forget what I'm thinking about and I lose my train of thought.
It's starting to happen to me as well. Yeah, it didn't really happen a couple of years ago, but I'm now the wrong side of 50. You can guess what the right side is, 49 and below. I'm now the wrong side of 50, and more and more senior moments are occurring in my life.
Well, it's not bad. I think we're good for our age. Now, the next expression is to cut corners. You probably know what a corner is, and you probably know the verb to cut. But if you cut corners doing something, then you do it in the easiest or cheapest way, which is probably not a good idea. So it's quite a negative expression. Let me give you an example. There's often a temptation to cut corners when time is short. So you're rushing to finish the work, you need to get something done, and you cut corners. You don't do it properly because you want to save time.
Let me give you another example. You can't cut corners with the safety of passengers on a plane, even though it costs a lot. You can't cut corners. Although it has been rumored that certain Irish low-cost companies do, but in theory, you cannot cut corners with passenger safety.
Not a good idea. Although many corners were cut, there's the use of the passive, many corners were cut during the COVID pandemic. For example, some nurses had to wear some plastic rubbish bin bags as protective clothing, and some wore snorkeling or diving masks because they didn't have the PPE, the protective equipment. So the governments really cut corners in some cases with safety equipment for nurses during the pandemic. What's the last one, Reza?
Oh, I'm having a senior moment. Where is it? Oh, I find it.
Brainstorm.
It's to brainstorm. Think of the word brain. Think of the word storm. A storm in your brain? Well, not exactly, but imagine lots of brains get together and there's a lot of activity and they come up with ideas. So to brainstorm is to hold a discussion in a group to produce ideas. So a group brainstorms ideas. It can also be a noun. It can be to brainstorm or a brainstorm. For example, Reza and Craig brainstormed some ideas for future podcast episodes. That means we sat down together and we said, okay, what have we not talked about yet, Craig? And the answer was not very much, but there's a few things we haven't talked about. And so Craig said, Christmas drinks. I said, dogs' names. Craig said, different types of cutlery. And we went on and on and on till we eventually had the idea. I know. What about part 10 of 8 more colloquial expressions?
Not the most imaginative, but I think very useful for a lot of people.
It works. So we settled on that. That's what came out of our brainstorming session.
We didn't cut corners, I promise. But speaking of brainstorming, it's your turn now to practice your English. We would like you to do some brainstorming with ideas for future episodes. We're giving you the go-ahead to send a message. Reza, how can people send a voice message to us?
You could record an audio and send it to us through speakpipe.com. There's a link in the show notes to that. Bear in mind there's a time limit though. The maximum voice message can be 90 seconds, I believe.
Yes, and we don't want to put you on the spot because we know that some of you get a bit nervous and anxious when you're speaking English. So if you prefer an email, you can reach me at Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or emails to Reza go to Belfast, Reza, Reza, at gmail.com.
This podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. Why don't you visit the online store and check out the various interesting products there, which could help you with your English? Have a look at store, that's S-T-O-R-E, store.mansioningles.net.
And we'd like to thank all of you who are helping us by supporting this podcast on Patreon. You too can join our Patreon program for as little as $1.20 per month. That's including the VAT tax. And if you do so, you get instant access to recent transcriptions of this podcast so that you can read every word that Reza and I say. Go to Patreon, patreon.com/Inglespodcast. Unfortunately, we can't thank all of you who are supporting us. The list is too long. But Reza, would you be kind enough to thank our latest Patreon supporters?
Yes, these are the names of people who've just joined the scheme recently. We've got Yasmin Cagle, Josemi, Daniel Valencia Gomez, Jose Luis Anselmi, and Honorario Lisboa Neto. Thanks to you and everybody who sponsors us through the scheme.
Now, as we are recording this podcast, it is the last podcast of 2022. So if you're listening to it on the day of release or close to that, we really do hope it's been a better year for you in 2022 and that next year, 2023, will be even better. Reza, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but would you like to say anything for the new year?
Oh, you have put me on the spot. I had a senior moment there. All I can say is, please keep listening, keep practicing your English, and above all, keep the feedback coming in. And thanks very much for supporting us, everybody.
Yeah, have a happy new year. In next week's episode, we have another wonderful story by a friend of the show, Jose Molino Marco. The name of the story is The Old Satchel. So join us next week for some wonderful listening comprehension and vocabulary practice. Until next time, if you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. It's goodbye from Reza.
And it's goodbye from Craig.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.